This week, we are talking about money again. This time, we are talking about more of the stewardship aspect, the greed and debt part of it. But that is what we're going to be talking about this week.
Church. Family. Theology. News. Entertainment. Evangelism. If it's Christian, then we're talking about it. This is the Mike Charleston Podcast.
All right, this is the Mike Charleston Podcast. This is Mike Charleston, and today I am joined with Sarah.
Hello, everybody.
And Larry's on the line, I think. Larry?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Yes,
or
there's Larry.
Whatever.
Early in the morning for you. Well, actually, it's earlier for us. So today we're doing a little bit different. We're going away for the weekend, and we tried to record this on Friday night, but we're doing this Friday morning, and so it's a little bit different. And we're shooting this in our bedroom instead of out in our living room. So if you're watching on YouTube, this isn't a new look. This is just a temporary look, but whatever. It'll work. So we're going to continue today talking about money and just how to handle money and different aspects. We're going to continue where we left off. Basically, my kids were saying how we just ended it, and they're like, "Dad, you do a podcast. You could go for 3 hours." I'm like, "Son, I'm not doing 3 hours. I'm not."
They are right that you probably could go for 3 hours.
I could personally, but I don't get paid for this, and so no, we're not going 3 hours. Now, when we start getting paid, that means people want to listen for 3 hours. Then we might do it for 3 hours. But no, we're not Joe Rogan or anything like that out there. Ben Shapiro, I think, does a 3-hour show. Dave Ramsey does a 3-hour show. No, we are not doing a 3-hour show today. But we are going to be talking about money and how this affects our lives in a lot of ways. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. However, usually what we do at the beginning of the show is just kind of go over the past week, and if there is anything in our lives, we kind of talk about it. I think people care about that. I know that's Jeannie's favorite point. She's going to smile because I mentioned her name again. So, Larry, anything exciting besides having to turn off your water to finish the backsplash?
No, that's a sore subject. It's frustrating, but actually, we did have something kind of exciting happen. Amanda, well, that came out wrong.
I was going to say, whoa, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, I was going to say Amanda left, but she did, but it's not exciting.
That's not the exciting
left.
part?
Yeah, that totally went the wrong way. Well, she did leave. She went to Texas, and then from Texas, she's going to Zambia.
Right, that's in
which
Africa.
Is in Africa.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like Kamala Harris. Zambia is a country in Africa. And, I don't know if you saw that news clip where she's talking about Ukraine. Anyway.
What did she say?
Some
Ukraine was in
people get
Africa?
That. No, she said Ukraine is a country in Europe, and Russia is a bigger country.
Wow.
It was bizarre. Anyway.
Yeah, Russia is the biggest. So, I think maybe Canada might be bigger. I don't know. Canada's one, Russia's one. One of them's one or two, and then it's America, I think. I don't know. But Russia's big.
Good thing it's not a geography podcast.
No, if you came here for your geography lessons, you're in trouble. Even though
I do know Zambia is in Africa. It's east or west of Mozambique.
Because that's where she's eventually going to go, is Mozambique, right?
Maybe, yeah. That's the family she's with. That's what they're trying to do, is get into Mozambique.
Okay, well, that's cool. Yeah. Well, cool. And it's just for vacation, right? Oh.
Yeah. No.
They're going over there.
You know, Zambia is that popular tourist destination.
Yes, that's where all the Americans go, right? No. So, babe, is there anything that we have done this week? I know you put down like just a breath of fresh air, right?
Well, it's just this week I actually had one afternoon where we had finished our schoolwork, and I actually had a moment that I was like, wow, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Like usually for the last, long while, we've always had big projects and things that are pressing. And so it was just a weird feeling to think, wow, I don't have anything I have to do right now.
Well, that breath of fresh air is not going to last very long because April is a pretty busy month for us.
Yeah.
And one of those things is trying to get that Shindig website up so people can register for the upcoming Shindig at the end of September, beginning of October.
Right.
And we announced that finally the dates, but we got to get out there so people can register. So if you're out there listening, be looking for that here pretty soon. It's a little bit more complicated, and Jeremiah and Abigail are working hard at putting that on the website, all the coding and stuff. So last night they stayed up testing it, all the possibilities, make sure it's all working, and I don't know if it is. Honestly, I don't know if it is working yet.
I know it's very, very close. They're maybe a couple steps away. So.
And then we're going to go away for the weekend, so that just messed all that up. So anyway, other than that, we've had our kids with breathing issues, and so we've taken a number of them to the pulmonologist.
Right. Yep.
Okay, and I said it correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why don't they just call it the lung doctor? That's more simple.
Know. Well, because you probably can pay more money if you're going to a pulmonologist instead of just going to a lung doctor. Yeah. So sounds sophisticated. But yeah, I took the younger three there this week, and they all did some kind of test where you blow out candles. I don't know, but basically
You could have done that at home.
I know.
Well, Rebecca wanted to do the test. She was like, that sounds like fun. I'm like, guys, this is a doctor. Come on, man.
Well, it was like a video game candle blowing out test. I don't know. But anyway, so they have a couple of them on some new inhalers and to try to see if we can fix their breathing problems. So.
Yeah, they haven't had too many issues like lately, but because they did, we took them in. And they've noticed something. So I don't know. The question is still, is there something in our house? Is there just something in their DNA? I mean, Sarah and I don't have any really breathing issues. No. So I'm suspecting there might be something with the house. But whatever. We'll figure that stuff out here in the near future. So, Anything else?
I think that's about it.
Yep, the Shindig website. So once again, that family camp that's coming up at the end of September 29th to October 2nd, I believe it is.
That's correct.
Is coming up, and registration is going to be opening soon. So if you are listening, look forward to that. I think they're changing the website's name and all that, or is it still MississippiShindig.com?
I think the name's still the same.
Okay, the email and all that's changing, or the YouTube's changing. I don't know, but it is MississippiShindig.com. You can go check that out. We have messages from the previous year, pictures and videos and information that's coming up. Some of that information is old, so we need to update that. But anyway, that is what's going on, and I don't know about you, but the subject is a big subject that we're going to be talking about, money. And let's get into it, I guess. When we take a break, we'll get back, we'll recap last week, and then we'll get right into it.
You're listening to the Mike Charleston Podcast.
All right, we are back, and we are talking money. So maybe we're not talking like that. We're not going to be money cometh to me. But money is such a big subject. If you listened to last week's program, if you didn't listen to last week's show, maybe go back and check that out a little bit. I know we're not Dave Ramsey and all that, but we do have opinions on money, and they're not too different from his. But it's such a big aspect of our life that we covered a couple issues right there. So why don't you give us a little bit of a recap there, babe?
Okay, well, last week, the first thing we talked about is your hope or trust in your wealth. So we kind of just went over, do you trust in it?
Which, Rebecca was talking to us, and she had a question. Of course, I just ratted her out now. She was going to email in, but she's like, I can't email because I'm your daughter. Like, we talked about it. But she did have, like, an interesting question. We're not going to discuss it necessarily, but it goes with number one, is your hope and trust in your wealth. And that is, when you talk about, like, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? That verse, and it talks about all these bad things. But when you confront people about this, when you're preaching, everyone agrees. No one says that they love money. Right. But somebody out there does because it's in the Bible, right?
It's in the Bible a whole lot. So a lot of people, I think, are struggling with that.
So the whole point of this is to examine our heart. This is not to like point fingers at other people. This is a heart issue between you and your Savior. So we are all affected by our culture at some level. Is our culture godly? Or is our culture anti-Christ? Is it anti-God in some ways? And so if it is anti-God, then I would rather go with the Bible, what the Bible says. And if it doesn't, like if it goes along with the Bible, then great. You know, our society is a godly society, then great. But those aspects that aren't, then we need to change. And that's what our challenge is for people out there, is to think biblically. Let's think what the Bible says. The Bible has, God has a way of living and how we handle our money and how we handle our finances, how we view money. So this is a big issue. So number one is your hope or trust in your wealth?
And then speaking of culture, number 2 last week was, do you have enough? Are you content? We talked about godliness with contentment. It's great gain.
Yes.
And in our culture, I mean, do you have enough? Wow. Nobody has enough, it seems.
Yeah. I think it's funny how everybody knows money it doesn't buy happiness, but yet keep
trying.
We all
try.
Right.
Yeah.
We keep trying.
There's a country song. It says that money can't buy happiness, but it can buy me a boat and a truck to pull it.
That's right. No, like we said earlier, that we were talking about that earlier. And, if it was a choice between, if I was an unbeliever and I'm miserable, I'd rather be a rich, miserable person than a poor, miserable person. But it doesn't get you happiness at all.
No.
But anyway, what was number 3 there, babe?
And then number 3, what do we know of greed and debt? And I feel like we didn't cover that so much, so we're going to I wanted to jump back a little bit on this because we didn't talk about this one as much as I'd like, because I think this is a big issue. Going into debt, having greed. Once again, this is a lot of most Americans. If you bring up these subjects, most Americans are going to say, "Oh, well, I don't really love money. It's the love of money that is the problem." And I don't have greed. I could give. I don't have to have all this stuff, and I don't have to have the fancy house or the fancy cars, or I don't have to have the fancy clothes. But I can. And I'm like, well, that's kind of like people saying I can quit drinking coffee, or I can quit eating too much, and I can stop smoking dope. Well, then do it, But, not that coffee's, I'm not comparing coffee to dope, but but if you could, then why don't you? Because you want it. That person that smokes cigarettes and says, I could quit smoking any time. And I'm like, but you don't want to. So it's fruitless. So when we're examining this is a heart examination for all of us. We wanted to go back over, we're going to dig deeper into debt. Now, when you typed that out, you didn't realize what you were doing there. That was kind of cool. I didn't.
You don't want to dig deeper into debt.
No, but most people do.
No, the Bible does not talk good about debt. There's only, we covered some of the verses last week, and then because of time, we didn't go deeper into debt.
Right.
That's funny.
Good.
So, yes. And so, full disclosure here, I want to be quite clear. I'm not judging anybody. I'm not saying that we're better than anybody. But to be fair, I've never owned a credit card in my life. That was before the Dave Ramsey thing came along, and I was like, dude, I not that I'm better than anyone. Like I said last week, I tried to get a credit card twice, and they rejected me. That's how bad my credit was. But the only loans that I've ever had in my life was a mortgage and one couple $1,000 student loan that I had to finish paying off to finish a year. And that was it. So what I'm saying is I practice what I preach, and it's not easy. I'm going to be very honest with you here. It is not easy. That's why I tried to get a credit card. This is, you want to get things when you want them. And most of mine, when I wanted them, it wasn't for like super selfish reasons. It was like we didn't have any money and we needed something, but did I really need it? That was the question. And it's amazing that if you trust God, that these things kind of work themselves out. People all of a sudden show up in your life. I can't even tell you how many things people have given us things that really have blessed us in the long run, or even in the short run.
Yeah.
So these things are, once again, I'm not making judgments. If you are in debt right now, it's, no shame. There's a lot of people in debt. But what is the goal? My goal was, as a parent, was to teach my kids that they don't have to start out that way, that we didn't start out, we didn't have any money. We literally just didn't have any money. And so to try to navigate this world, we had to get a mortgage. And look, the Bible does mention it's okay to get a mortgage, but it was like a curse. If you look in Nehemiah, I think it's Nehemiah 5 off the top of my head, so don't quote me on that, but I believe it's in Nehemiah 5 where they mortgaged their homes because they were in such destitute situations. But we've gotten to that place where we want big homes, we want fancy cars, that we're willing to go into debt. So the question here you have, babe, is what?
Why do we have debt?
Why do we have debt?
That's the heart of the matter is, you talk about people having debt, but we need to analyze, why do I need to go into debt?
Yeah. Well, Larry, you want to take this one first?
Yeah. Well, mostly it's like you mentioned earlier, we want things and we want them now. We don't want to wait.
Yeah.
Well, right. And it's kind of a new concept, actually, in the history of the world. Not that people never were in debt. The Bible does talk about people going and getting in debt, but it was a really bad, you almost like turned yourself into a servant or a slave to pay off certain debts that you owed. That was not a good thing. And I know ours is a lot cleaner these days, but we are servants or slaves to the banks, to the stores that we go and buy our stuff from.
Yeah.
We are servants to them because we owe them. We don't have the freedom that we would like to have. To get the things that we quote unquote need, that we really need these things. So anyway, why do we have debt?
Yeah, so it sounds like I think that you think that maybe not most, but a lot of debt is just related to greed. So that's really not a good thing.
I think a lot of it is impatience, and plus you have to know where you are in your life. So if I'm making $8 an hour, and can I get that new iMac studio?
Probably not.
It's probably not wise.
Not a good idea.
No, right.
So if you make more, you can spend more, is what you're saying.
In some ways. But if you save your money up for a particular thing, like if you needed a car, the problem is we just feel like we need a car and it needs to be a nice car because we can justify a nice car. We don't want it to break down. Yeah, we want it. So instead of saving up, we just go get a loan and we end up spending more. So there's a difference between the price of a vehicle and the cost of a vehicle. And a lot of Americans don't understand that. They go look at a car and they're like, well, it's $20,000. I'm like, no, it's not $20,000. That's the sticker price. But you have the other costs that are involved in buying the new car or the $20,000 car, which was the example. But it's a lot of people. You're going to have to make these decisions for yourself. Is like, okay, am I being greedy here? Am I, and there might be in a place where, look, we know a lot of people have big families. And it's like, you can't just go get a $5,000 car, right? So you need to go get a van, and these vans aren't cheap. And so do you have to finance a van at times? There might be a time where you might have to. But I believe the goal is freedom. God doesn't want his children bound by anything. He doesn't want us to be bound by sin. He doesn't want us to be bound to other people like that we are in debt to. So he wants us to be free to serve him, free to be able to have our time and our abilities free.
Yeah. One thought real quick about the whole debt thing. I think sometimes there probably are people that just don't understand the math of it. And I feel like just coming, as a homeschool mom, I'm like, I think it is important for parents to teach their kids about interest and interest with debt and even compound interest with savings and some of those things. Like, I don't know, I think some people kind of overlook some of that, but it's very important that your kids understand that when you do buy that car for $10,000, but with whatever interest rate, what you're actually going to pay. And I think sometimes people don't even understand that going into, starting out their life. It's kind of important that they understand those things.
A car is a great example of that because if you finance a new car, the car will depreciate in value, so you're losing on that. But then your interest, the amount you end up paying at the end, is so far greater than what the car is worth by the time you pay the loan off. It's ridiculous when you look at a chart like that. Most of the time when people see it, it's like, wow, that's a big difference.
Well, no, and it's the same as like with the house. If you ever done a amortization schedule, and you almost pay for your house twice. It's like,
right,
and people are like, well, you got to live somewhere, and I get it. I'm not saying you shouldn't go get a mortgage, but try to pay that thing off quickly. Make an extra payment here or there, cut it down. Mm-hmm. But if you do a 30-year mortgage, you are so basically my math is not going to, I didn't do any.
No fact check here.
Right, please don't. But if you do a $100,000 house, by the end of that 30 years, it's going to be about over $200,000 that you have paid. So you have bought basically another house in that process.
Closer to 300. Depending on interest rate.
Right. It depends on interest rate. But if you never make an extra payment, and that's why, if you do get a mortgage, try to make an extra payment. Try to, you want to try to get out from under this as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
For many reasons.
It's funny how this thing, years ago, I used to work for a bank. They went out of business. And the reason they went out of business is because of their lending policy.
Okay.
They were doing second mortgages. They were called 125 loans. It was 125 loan to value. So when it was a second mortgage, and the interest rates on the average interest rate was around 13%.
Good night.
Wow.
So people were borrowing $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 against their house at 13% interest. I'm like,
houses do appreciate, but not that quickly.
Wow.
Right. So the bank would get so many, they get, for example, like $100 million in loans, and then they would sell those as securities, and they would make 1 or 2%. But 1% of $100 million, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. What happened was they couldn't sell them anymore, and then eventually the whole bank went out of business. They were a pretty good sized bank in the state of Florida, and they shut them down. But I was amazed. I was like, wow, people are actually doing this.
Well, I don't blame the people so much than the banks, because the people are like, so I can get a loan and get some more money, but they don't understand how that works. Like what's the point of just buy the furniture in cash, buy the other appliances in cash, but no, we're going to add that onto our mortgage.
Well, right. It's amazing to me how people, this goes into like contentment debt and stuff. It's like, you can buy so much stuff used, and it's nice stuff. Like, I think of like the furniture in our house. I think some of it we bought new, like our little dresser. It's a small dresser, but I don't know. I think most of the stuff, pretty much all the stuff in our house is secondhand.
I was going to say, I was hoping you were going to say used. I'm like, well, all of our stuff is used too, but secondhand, that's a good differentiation there. So
it's used and secondhand.
It's all used, but no, secondhand. It's we like shopping at thrift stores. You can actually find some pretty good deals out there, and then you end up with a lot of junk too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, nowadays it's easier to find these things, these deals. Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and others.
Yep.
So. Yeah, our stuff is like secondhand. It probably won't make it to the third hand.
That's right. Well, so here's the challenge that we have, that in America especially, we're so consumer oriented. We have commercials that are pounding away at us, and so we just accept this way of life. We think like this is what we have to do as Americans. We have to live this way. I don't live a certain way. Like I purposely reject our culture to live a different way, and a lot of our friends do the same thing. But when it comes to money, I definitely do. I definitely don't want to go the direction and just buy because America says we need to. But here are some common types of debt. What are some common types of debt out there, babe?
Well, the top 4 I found were home mortgages, which we've talked about,
Right.
car loans, student loans, and then credit card debt.
So so a lot of people are going to say, well, come on, man, we need to live somewhere, mortgages. And that is actually very reasonable. I get that. Even car loans. Well, you think about car loans. The first car loans that they were given out were in the 1950s. That was when they had the first car loans. That was around 1950s. Think about it.
Wow.
That 50% of Americans, about 50%, had mortgages on their homes. And then they started getting loans for cars in the 50s sometime. So a lot has changed. People think, well, this is how it's always been. It hasn't been. People paid cash for their houses. People paid cash for vehicles. When vehicles first came out, it was a luxury. Now it's like, no, you have to have a vehicle. You have to have 2 vehicles. You have to have 3 vehicles. I don't know how many vehicles we have on our property. We have a lot of kids.
The car lot, isn't it?
Yes,
Basically.
pretty much. And then you have student loans. Student loans out there. Well, I have to go to school. Says who? For one.
Right. You want to make more money so you can buy more stuff later on.
So to make a lot of money, you got to take a big loan out so you can go to school, so you can pay back that money, so you can make a lot of money. It's just a weird system that we have. But, that's what people say you have to do. You have to go to college. Well, unless you're like, exactly what you're going to be, like if you're going to engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or something that absolutely has to need a college education, why are we going? Just because it's culturally acceptable?
That's what everybody does. So.
Right, and you just waste how much money so you can clean windows or you can, deliver mail. A lot of people that I know, and I don't have the stats on this, I should have looked it up, but a lot of people end up not using their degree at all. Whatever they went for, they end up not using it. And it is so funny how that works. But, was it a waste? I'm not saying it was a total waste. And then credit card debt. Credit card debt is the absolute worst. When you actually think about what credit card debt is, you go in with your credit card to buy a cheeseburger or a Big Mac, you're going to end up paying more for that in the long. Why are we buying stuff that are consumables on credit card? I don't understand that. But credit card debt is the plight of America, if I could say that, or the blight. I don't know which one is it? Maybe both.
One of those. Blight.
I think it's blight.
Well, I think that and student loans, because I think that something like over $1 trillion in student loans.
That's crazy.
Now.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's
just
insane.
To get a job, right?
Yeah. Andrew told me about this video he watched a couple of years ago. It compared 2 people that in their like 18, 20 years old in their career. One went to be a plumber and the other went to college to be a doctor. And the doctor didn't end up making more money than the plumber until about 10 years before he retired.
Okay, right.
Because by the time he paid off all his student loans and he got through college and stuff, he really didn't make that much of an income until it was near the end of his career. Whereas the plumber, I think in his example, I think he went to trade school for a year,
right,
and then got a job and was working. And so he worked his entire career and he saved his money and stuff. This guy I used to know. He went in the Army, and then after he got out of the Army, he went to school, and he used the GI Bill. And then his brother was a plumber. It was kind of weird, but then his brother got into building homes. Brother didn't have a college degree, but he had a trade, and he made a bunch of money. He became a very wealthy man. And my friend, who went to college, never used his degree for what he went to, and
I think that's very common.
It's like, so learning a skilled trade to me is so much. But that's why I told my boys, I'm like, if you want to go to college, okay, that's fine. Find a way to pay for it. You might want to learn a skill first so that you have a way to pay for college. But even if then you always have something to fall back on if you want. But having a skill is much better and much cheaper than getting a student loan. And I went to college and I don't even use it.
Absolutely. Same here. Of course, I didn't graduate, but
I did. But it was. it was a waste. I could have done. I didn't. Anyway, that's a different story.
You could have been somebody, man. You could have been a contender.
That's right.
But it's really this is a heart matter, and we can't give you a list of this is how you know you love money. This is how you know you love things. There's not a test. It's really at the heart of the matter where you have to be quite honest with yourself and with God and be like, God, reveal these things. I do not want to be greedy. Am I being impatient? The impatience is really the biggest part of this. We want it now. Right. We want it when we want it. I remember my dad telling me years ago that if you want something, wait 2 weeks. And if you still want it, buy it. Well, I think I've taken to the extreme. I'm like, if I want something, I'll wait a month and then talk about it some more. And then maybe in 2 weeks, buy it. But we shouldn't be impulsive, when we walk into a store. That does say something about our character if we're impulsive. We just walk in and be like, ooh, that looks good. Ooh, I need those cookies. Ooh, look at that candy bar. I need this now. I want it now. Want. You want it now. Can we deny ourselves? I mean, does that sound familiar? That we should deny ourselves. And this world isn't all for our pleasure. And sometimes we need to discipline ourselves in our eating, our spending. I mean, this is all connected. Everything is connected.
Yeah. A synonym for the word greed, I think, would be being unthankful.
Oh, there you go. That's not bad.
Goes with it.
Yeah. Are we thankful for what we have, with what we have? But let's move on here with we haven't even got into this week's portion yet. So.
Oh, yeah.
I think you guys like to talk about this subject.
Well, yeah, we were talking about what we're going to talk about in the future, marriage and money. And I think that is going to be more, I really like that subject.
But we're not talking about that.
We're not talking about that right now. Okay. So why don't you tell us what's next there,
All right.
babe?
The next one is, are you working hard or are you lazy? And is there a need for rest?
So yeah, this one is, and you said, should we be diligent? This one is a very interesting thing as we get talking about it, because it's, as you're going to find out, do we work so hard that we neglect family and friends and church and ministry, and we just work so hard for money? Well, we'll get into all that. Or are we too lazy? So there's going to be a fine line. We don't want to be working 60 hours a week, or we don't want to be working at all, like I'm doing right now. But no, but you don't want to. You want to be diligent in what we're doing. So why don't you go ahead, babe? We got Proverbs 10:4.
It says, "He becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich."
Well, here we go. Maketh rich. There we go. See, so we're supposed to be rich, right?
You're diligent, then you're going to become rich.
No, but you.
Yeah, there you go.
Look, if you work hard, like I've told my kids before, especially these days, especially now, of all time, if you just show up, you're going to be in charge. You're going to be in charge. They just want somebody to show up. Yeah. Okay, so Proverbs 12:24.
The hand of the diligent shall bear rule, but the slothful shall be under tribute.
It is important to be diligent.
Yeah, if you're diligent, you can become rich, and you will rule.
That's right. Yeah. If you're just diligent. Now, that word diligent, what kind of picture does that give you, Larry, when I say diligent?
Somebody that's consistent with a purpose.
Sure.
Maybe,
okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. What would you say, babe?
I don't know. I guess I think of a farmer going out daily to take care of his crops. He takes
basically
the time
vanity.
What?
Just vanity, because you're just repeating the same things over and over. Doing
but you just take the time to do the things that are required in order for you to, be successful in, whatever it is that you're doing.
Absolutely. So. I think of an athlete that you have a goal in mind. You're trying to make the team, and then you're trying to accomplish a goal as a team. Well, guess what you have to do? You don't just show up. A football team doesn't just show up on Sunday. They go through drills. They go through practice. They're diligent in their studies. They practice the same thing over and over until they get. Same thing with the military. They train over and over and over. They're diligent in what they do. I guess another word is kind of faithful. They're faithful.
Right. Yeah. That's good.
So
well, and we know that, it says, I believe in Colossians, whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. So I mean, we are supposed to work hard at what we're doing and to be diligent. I think that there definitely is something to that. We know we should work hard, but can you work too much?
Well, see, this is the question. So, being diligent. Once again, we are in our culture. We are in America. When we think of working hard, we are thinking of a 40-hour week, of going to a job. The Bible doesn't necessarily teach that. It just says be diligent in whatever you do. Work hard. Whatever you do, work hard. Whatever you do it unto the glory of God. Whatever you do. Yeah. And so it doesn't necessarily say we need to work 40 to 50 hours a week for another man, for a company in Seattle, something like that. But so we, in our culture, we have a 40-hour work week. Where did that come from? Where did that come? Is that good or bad? So we have the Industrial Revolution that came into being. I don't know exactly.
18.
Yeah, I should have wrote that down. It was a little different in England, and it was a little different in America.
Right.
And I've studied the Industrial Revolution a good bit, the English side, the British side, and the American side, and it's very fascinating. About the American Revolution, Industrial Revolution, and the American Revolution too. But the Industrial Revolution is a very fascinating thing. A lot of things came out of that and kind of formed what we are as a world, even, but especially in America. But people started out working. What, about 100 hours?
Yeah, that's what I found.
That's what you found? Now, that's absurd. People are like, well, how do you do that? Well, it's called slavery. And
that's all they did.
Yeah, that's all you did because you were desperate to make it in America. You were desperate to just have your own little piece of land, your own little world. Right. You were desperate to not be in servitude to anybody, that you're willing to work 100 hours a week. It's reminded me of, look at some of the Mexicans that come over. They're desperate to do whatever, even though they're willing to break the law. They're willing to work and live together in 4 or 5 families in a home. And I'm not trying to stereotype, but we know of people that do this. They are willing to work long hours because they are desperate to make it here in America. They want to live here. They want to succeed in America. So when you have that, and you don't have any laws, we didn't have any laws against all this. So 100 hours a week was very common, and that's brutal, honestly. If you're working, I don't even know how you can get there. 12 to 14 hours a day. That's.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's over 12 hours every day, 7 days a week. Because 7 times 12 is 84. So I'm like, it's even more than that. I'm like, wow.
Well, you start to lose your inefficiency. So then by 1926, Henry Ford changed from 6 8-hour days to 5 8-hour days.
Right.
So he noticed the production went up. So he was a practical man. He was like, hey, if people are more productive this many hours. So think about it. We are trading hours of our life for money. This started really during the Industrial Revolution, easy for me to say. Not to say that people never traded hours for money before, but mainly you traded services for money. Like, I'll do you a service and you give me money. But now, since the Industrial Revolution, we go to these factories, we go to a job, and we just clock in, we clock out. Now, I'm not suggesting we go back to an agrarian society, not at all. But maybe we need to rethink some of the clocking in, clocking out mentality. Maybe I need to provide a service for people. Maybe I need to do something a little bit different to get my time back. But anyway, this is what happened. So then what happened in 1938, babe?
Congress passed the Fair Labor Standards Act, which required employers to pay overtime to all employees who worked more than 44 hours in a week. And then they amended the act 2 years later to reduce the work week to 40 hours. And in 1940, the 40-hour work week became U.S. law.
So they had this really stifled businesses because they're like, oh, now we have to pay overtime. Forget about that. Okay, we're happy with the 40 hours.
Yeah.
So, people work 40 hours, and that's what they work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. That is, the common saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Which, like we talked about with culture, I feel like, again, like you're saying, it's just something that we should question. It's not wrong to work 40 hours a week, but we do just accept it because this is just the American way. You go work 8 to 5 or whatever your hours are, and we take it as this is what God wants us to do, and that's not anywhere in the Bible. It's just that's what our culture says.
Well, right, and then what happens? 1938 is the Fair Labor Act, and then you have in the 40s, we had a thing called World War II. And during World War II, it was all hands on deck, right? Everyone participated in the war effort. And so the women started going off to work because the guys were out at war, right? And so they went out and guess what they started learning? They were like, hey, this is kind of cool. We don't have to raise the kids anymore. We can, someone else can do that. And we're bringing more income into the house. And when the guys got back from the war, it was like, well, what are we going to do with these ladies? I need my job back. And then they realized, hey,
if we both work,
that's right.
we get more money.
And so work and I work, that's like double the money, except for women didn't make that much. So almost double the money. That is a big deal. And so I think that's where over time, the two-income household has become more popular. And today, more than about 60% of households have dual incomes. 60%. Now, some people might think that's higher.
I thought it was higher than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about households, so I don't know. 60% still seems high to me, but
it is. Yeah, it's too high. I just thought it was higher than that, but
it might be now. But what we found, it was 60%. But we'll go with 60%. Yeah. So think about the changes that we have from going from the Industrial Revolution to working for hours, just going and clocking in. So that takes the husband away from his family. He no longer is incentivized to do his own work, whatever his skills are. He has one specific skill. If it's just putting the screw on this one part of the automobile for Henry Ford, I know that's a little simplistic, but you know what I'm saying. Right. He's just licking stamps and checking emails. And but that's his job. That's his one skill set. So he doesn't develop any skills. And then you get a little bit more... Like, we want more stuff. We want to succeed. We want a better future for our kids. So how about we send off the lady to work? And so she's no longer a keeper at home. All these things are anti-biblical. These things are directed to attack the family. This is all in an effort to grow humanism in our culture at large. It's almost like Hellenism has spread. And when I say Hellenism, I'm not cursing here. That's the Greek influence. Our American influence has grown all over the world. There's a lot of cultures that are offended that the women go off to work, but not here. We encourage it. We want equal pay. We want the women to join force. You were going to say something there, Larry?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's weird to me how, like, even churches, that I'll see it, they talk about family values and all this, but then they'll open a daycare.
Right, exactly.
Well, how are you're promoting the separation of the family, and where's the mom to be the keeper of home?
Yeah, you got to be careful, Larry. This is controversial.
I know. Well, this is weird. So, Amanda, this family near us, they hired her to babysit because their nanny was on vacation or something. She made $700 something in a week.
I know. I should do nannying work then.
Yeah, I'm like, that's crazy because they have a nice house and they have really nice cars. I'm like, how do you at the cost of your kids? They have two little girls. Like, you never see them. You're always working. And your nice car is sitting in a parking lot baking in the sun somewhere because you're working
pretty
to
much
pay for it. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense.
No, like we don't really think about the ramifications of all. Like, it's a terrible. It's a wheel. It's a, what do they call it? Like the hamster wheel. We're just going round and round. The rat race, wheel, right?
Yeah.
And you're just going round and round and round for what purpose? Like, what is our purpose here on this earth? When you answer that question, a lot of things tend to fall into place. Yeah, is money a part of that? Absolutely. We're not ignorant that we need to make some money to live in this world. But is it the most important thing? So many people are like, that's what they're chasing is the almighty dollar. So why? Yeah. So they can have their weekend, so they can do what they want. Well, is that really what we're supposed to be about? So anyway, we're stuck on number 4, but go ahead.
I was going to say this goes into number 5. Money, stewardship. Money is a tool to be used.
Absolutely.
Like any other tool, and it's not wrong to have it. It's just how do you use it?
So what is number 5 there, Larry?
Stewardship.
Yeah, stewardship. Whenever you say stewardship, it is. I'm sorry. That's what happens when I'm drinking tea on the air.
Well, money is sort of like fire. Fire is useful for a lot of things. You know, it can warm your house, cook your food, and it can do a lot of good things as long as it's controlled. The minute it gets out of control, it becomes very destructive.
Very destructive.
Quickly.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So stewardship, when we say the word stewardship, we always think about money, right?
Yeah.
Money, money, money. And I was watching a guy, actually he came up with 3 things, babe. You're going to remember them. There were 3 T's, right?
Yeah.
Time, talents, and what was the third one?
That's the one I can't remember.
Treasure? Money?
Oh, maybe.
Time, talents, and treasure.
Maybe treasure.
And, you know, I'm not very good with the onomatopoeias or whatever you call those things. They're not onomatopoeias. I know what an onomatopoeia is, but the letter things.
Alliteration.
Okay. But I liked that aspect because we are stewards of our time and our talents, even though you weren't sure about our talents. But not that we don't have talents, and our treasure, and we're entrusted with these things, and the most valuable, you would say, is what, babe?
I think the most valuable is time.
I understand, right? Time is the one thing that everyone has.
Right.
Right. We have equal amount of time. Everyone has the same amount of time. Now, maybe some people end up having more time because they live longer, but every day they have the same amount of hours and the same amount of time. And what we do with our time is very important. Not everybody has the same amount of money, and not everybody has the same amount of talents either.
Right.
So those are a little bit different, but we are stewards of our talents. Why don't you go ahead and read that one, a quote from Dave Ramsey.
Okay, it says, the reality is that many people today, including lots of Christians, don't understand the true meaning of stewardship, and that's a tragedy. Why? Because stewardship is our ultimate calling as Christ followers.
Yeah, so what do you think he's trying to say there? That stewardship and not just our money, but our time, our efforts, our talents, and all that, that is what we're responsible for. When we sit before God, we're going to be held accountable for what we have done. Right? In our bodies. And like, okay, so here is what I did, Lord, with the gifts you give. That parable, it reminds me of the guy with the talents, you know, and he buried his, and the one who used his talents got more talents. And you're like, well, I'm just not that talented of a person, and I'm not that gifted, and I don't have, well, you know what? Maybe you should try to do something. And you'd be amazed that God could use you or gift you in some ways that you had no idea that you were able to do that. So go ahead.
Well, I was actually wondering when I read this, if you would agree with that stewardship is our ultimate calling as Christ followers.
Well, the ultimate calling, I don't even know what you would like. What's ultimate calling mean? Obviously, our ultimate calling is to worship God, right? But how do we worship God? We worship God with our life,
with
what we do.
He's given us.
Right.
Yeah.
We were entrusted to do things, and with our money, with our time, with our talents. I mean, what else do we have to give, you know?
Right. Well, because he went back to Genesis, he said that was God's first command to people was to have dominion over the earth. So basically manage what he's given us on this earth.
Yeah, I could see that.
So,
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like I've been given, so I need to take care of what I've been given.
Right.
It's not mine. And that's the thing where a lot of people say, well, what am I going to do with my money? Here's the thing that is going to be a shocking thing. It's not my money. It's God's money. And I know people say that. Well, here's another thing. It's not my kids. They're God's kids. He's entrusted me for a certain season to raise them and to be seriously minded in that and training them in the way they should go. But in the end, they are not my kids. No, they are my kids. You know, in case you think they're not adopted. You know, but they are my kids. But they are the Lord's. They're God's children, and so it's my duty for that short season that they're in my house, that I am a steward of the time that I have with them, the steward of what I teach them, what I raise them up. That is a very important time. There's a lot of things that we have stewardship in that isn't just money, but since we are talking about money, this once again, this is a revealer of our heart, right, Larry? It shows us how we handle this, and we have to learn this. This isn't something that just comes to us. Honestly, this isn't something that is just. we're not born with the knowledge of how to handle money. Some of us were taught so poorly, and some of us were taught how to handle it.
Yeah.
So it's our duty to learn how to do this.
Well, and I think we all look forward to hopefully one day hearing, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." So
Right.
well done with what? What he gave us. It's like,
Absolutely.
okay, we took what he gave and we used it well.
All right. I don't know who DR is.
That's Dave Ramsey.
Oh, another Dave Ramsey. Okay, DR is Dave Ramsey. I was like, Doctor Who. What were you saying there, Larry?
I was going to say a good example, like Joseph. He was put in Potiphar's house not under ideal conditions, but he became a good steward of the position he was given. He rose to the top.
He did,
and
that's it.
He was a good manager or a good steward,
right?
Of somebody
Steward,
else's
manager,
business.
right?
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. You have another saying there.
Yeah. Dave Ramsey said, "Stewardship is managing God's blessings, God's ways for God's glory."
And I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, that is.
That's good.
It's all for God's glory, and that's at the ultimate end of this. Is what I'm doing with my money for God's glory, or is it for my glory? Is it for my selfishness? And let's be fair. I think we all have done selfish things with our money. We're all in that boat, right? I know I have. I'll just put myself out there. I've done selfish things with my money. I'm not perfect there in that area, but this is something that we're working towards. We want to stay focused on the goal. We all get sidetracked from time to time with our money and like, okay, oh, this would be nice. Why would this be nice? Is this for the glory of God? Is this for His pleasure? Maybe not. But I still want to do it.
Yeah. Well, sometimes things like that aren't necessarily bad. It's okay to go out and have fun and do things that are maybe frivolous in one sense, but they help kind of your mental attitude.
Well, and it helps maybe camaraderie in the household, or
right, yeah.
Like, is it ever okay? Is this for God's glory to go take the kids out for ice cream? Absolutely, it's for God's glory. If it's chocolate, absolutely. No, so
that's right.
Everything belongs to God. The earth is the Lord's. We are His managers. So we have to remember that this is His place. He created this place. He has given us blessings. So why don't you go ahead, babe, and just read 1 Peter 4:10.
As every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another, as good stewards of the manifold grace of God.
So there's the word stewards, right?
Right. Yeah.
I was challenging you guys. I don't think stewards is in the Bible. I'm like, oh man, I'm dumb. It was like in there like 12 times or something like that. But yeah, there's a verse in there that talks about ministering the same one to another, sharing our gifts, sharing our money, sharing our need. When one has a need, that we help each other out.
Right.
That we're stewards, we're managers, that this place is not just for us. This is God's place. Yeah. And so anyway, we've had to make some cuts here, so I don't know if it sounds kind of choppy. I don't know where I left off in that sentence. So anyway, read the next one there.
So we've each been given the money that we have, and we have an obligation to manage it well, which goes for time and the other resources we have also. But obviously, this is about money. So
yeah, we should not be wasteful, and I think we all know that. I think we all feel guilty when we do, and I think we have instant regret. And I think that's where most of the people, when they're impulse buyers, they have the most regret. Like they buy something, they're like, oh man, why did I do that? Why did I waste my money on that? It didn't last. I should have been more wise in my decisions. And that's fine. Honestly, as long as we learn from our mistakes and realize that I don't want to keep repeating the same error over and over. And if I keep buying this kitchen equipment that breaks, maybe I should get a better one. Maybe I should save up and get the more expensive one that will last. And so cheaper isn't always better. Right. And more expensive isn't always best. So we just have to do our own research and all that. But that's a whole nother. We're not talking about that. We're not doing consumer reports here. So anyway, okay. Well, let's move on to the next one, babe. What do we have here?
So the last one is: are you trusting in God's provision, or are you worrying? And I feel like when it comes to money, I mean, at the end of the day, we have to trust God with what we have, and not worry. We know. Matthew talks about not worrying, consider the lilies of the field, consider this. It's like we're not supposed to worry as Christians.
We are not supposed to worry. Everything that we talked about in the previous 5 things, that we talked about, is a way to worry. If you are in debt, guess what? You're going to worry a lot more when you're in debt.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you don't care. I don't know. But it's just the fact that if you are free, if you don't think about this, if you have a mortgage right now and you have car payments right now and you have a student loan, you have credit card debt, imagine if they were all gone. Imagine the stress in your life would be diminished. It's just a fact. There has to be a little bit of stress. Now, maybe not much for some, but there has to be some stress in your life when you owe people money. If you owe a family member money, there's a lot of stress. So don't borrow from family members, by the way. So there is all these things produce worry. Like, why do I want? We grasp and we attain, and I forget what James calls it, but we want all these things to consume it on our lusts. And we send our wives out to the workforce. We send our kids out to the workforce even. I work overtime. All these things for what? For money. For things, for possessions, things we have to worry about people stealing. We have to protect it all then. And then, or damaged, please don't sit on that. That's expensive. And I go to some fancy homes, and some of these homes, I'm like, there are no kids in this house. There is no way there are kids in this house.
No way.
Right, because there are kids, breakables all over the place, and in our circles, that living room be tore apart. But is that, people, we need to teach respect. There's no doubt about it. But do I want to have things in my house that people can't feel comfortable around just being themselves a little bit? And so that's what we want to think about here is, are you trusting in God's provision? Or are you worrying? So Philippians 4:19
says, but my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus.
So Larry, just ripped this whole thing out of its context. But you want to tackle this one?
Well, I mean, it reminds me of another verse Paul said, with food and raiment, therewith be content.
Yes.
He didn't even include a house.
Right.
So,
right.
And God will supply our needs, but there's a big difference between what you need and what you want.
And it's according to his riches.
So sometimes what I think I need, it really comes down to that's what I want.
Pretty much. We're not honest with ourselves, are we?
Right. Like in the Old Testament, because I think about this, like the Israelites going through they're getting to the promised land, that God fed them manna every day. Like, would I want to eat the same thing every day when I get tired of it?
I would get tired of it.
But then I thought, well, I eat the same thing every day for lunch, and I've been doing it for a couple of years, so I guess I could do that. It's a matter of, where your heart is, to say, okay, it's the same thing, but how can I make it different? And thank you, Lord, for providing for this.
Right, absolutely.
So it's that, I guess it goes back to where's your heart, and if God's going to supply your needs, He will supply your needs. It may not always be in the form you want it or what you want, but it'll meet your needs. And sometimes really our basic needs are things that will keep us alive.
Right, pretty much. House, shelter, clothing, food. I mean, those are needs. And apart from that, it's like, do I need a new TV? I don't know about need.
No, that'd be more of a want. Well, like food. You may want a nice porterhouse steak seared really well with nice salt, and anyway, but a peanut butter and jelly sandwich will keep you alive as well. So
yes, it does. Well, that's what I had a conversation with someone, and I don't remember who, and maybe they're listening, so I hope they don't get offended. But they were struggling financially, and we were going through some of these principles. This was years ago. And it was going through some of their finances. I'm like, you spend so much money on food. And they were like, well, we have to eat. I'm like, yes, that is true. We do have to eat, but we don't have to eat out. And we don't have to have steak and eat like kings. We can do beans and rice. Ramen
noodles are cheap.
If this is your season in life, guess what? Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches might be in your future. But we're so discontented sometimes. We're like, well, I want a steak, or like we were just saying, could we eat the same thing? No, it would be very difficult. Obviously, we could if we had to, But there's some cultures that's what they just eat the same things, over and over. And we're so spoiled. We're just like, I don't feel like chicken today. Let's do fish. Go to the store and get me fish. Gosh, I never have said that sentence in my life.
I was going to say that would never be heard here.
Never in this household. But
sounds good to me, though.
Yes. I'm trying to work up to it. But okay. So what about Matthew 6:25?
It says, "Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body more than raiment?" And then down verse 33 through 34 says, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof."
Yeah, so these things, obviously, people worry, and this is the big problem, that we are not to be worrying about our life and our possessions and where things are going to come from. I know it's human to do that at times. When I'm guilty of that at times. When I was in between jobs years ago, we had like $0, and I'm like, okay, this is fun, this is tight.
Yeah.
But God comes through. He doesn't want to see us suffer. But at the same time, I feel like when we go through those times, it's to teach us a lesson. And I remember learning those lessons like, man, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here again. And I don't want to be tempted to go into debt. I want to better myself to where we have the freedom to go and do things and minister without worrying about having to work overtime and things like that. So anyway, it's just that point number 6 is a very important one. That are we trusting in his provision, and are we worrying? Which actually ties into, are we trusting in his provision as in Christ? Christ came to be our provision for our sin. And sometimes we are worrying about our eternal life and that, am I good enough? Am I doing good enough? I have a debt here. I hope you see what I'm doing with this. I hope people are listening, that yes, in the same way that we deal with our money and we worry about that, some of us are worrying about our salvation too. And God has provided. His provision was Jesus Christ. And I hope that many people out there are trusting in that provision, and that they don't have to work and be in debt for sin. You know what I'm saying? So they shouldn't be worrying. I am not worried about my salvation. I am fully trusting in what he has done, in his provision. In the same way, we need to learn to do that in the physical, which is a little harder maybe, but I trust in his provision for my housing needs, my food needs, my clothing needs, and that he will provide in the same way. He's provided for my salvation. He will provide for my physical needs.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, because like the verses you just read, Matthew, I mean, isn't the body more than raiment and all that?
Right.
If Christ is the provision for our salvation, can't we trust him also for our provision for our physical needs?
We should, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's at the heart of it. Do I fully trust him? And that's where the heart of the matter is when it comes to finances and money. Do we really trust God with what he's done? I've been tempted, especially with doing this, the podcast, the YouTube, how much should I take off of work? I'm not working as much because I'm doing this. And it's like, well, I'll just trust God, and some people have actually blessed us, which, hey, look, if you want to do that, it's, I'm not going to say no, but we're not begging for it yet. Notice how I said yet. No, but God is good. He will take care of us. And we feel like this is a ministry that we like to do. And so it's something we're able to do, and we want to give our gifts and talents and our money and finances. I mean, this has cost us a good bit to set up, whether it's the video equipment, whether it's the audio equipment, and we're going to add more here in season 2. So Chuck's going to join us for season 2, and that means more microphones and headphones, right, Joshua? So, and more space. But it's fine. That's what we want to use, our talents, our gifts, and our money and resources for the glory of God. And I think there's other people out there that want to do that too. And I would encourage you to do that. Anyway, okay, so let's move on. I don't want to take a break or anything. I know we haven't taken a break at all. Joshua, we're going to make this easy for you. We're not going to do another break. But Abigail did have a question, and I haven't seen the question really. So what was the question again?
She said, what should a young person working full-time with few to no expenses do with their money?
Oh, yes. And if you know Abigail, she is...
Hey, she said she wasn't asking for herself because she doesn't have a full-time job.
Well, I know, but she is a saver. She is a daughter after my own heart. And here's the thing, though. So if you're a young person, our goal is not to just sit there and hoard up money.
Right.
But if there's nothing to spend it on, don't spend it. It's okay to have a savings account. I know some people are like, we shouldn't have money. Well, if you don't really see a big need for something at this moment and you don't really have expenses, then just sock it away for a rainy day or when some big thing comes up. You don't know when a big thing comes up. She was thinking about going to Ukraine for a missions opportunity. I don't think that's going to be happening.
I don't think
so.
But
it's supposed to happen in June or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's going to cost $3,000 to $5,000, something like that.
Right.
You can't just come up with that money all that quickly. It's okay to have a savings account.
Right.
So what should a young person working full-time with few to no expenses do with their money? Well, find things that you can be a blessing to. I don't know, save it. You don't know what your life is going to be in the future. What would you say, Larry?
She can invest it.
You could invest it.
Whoever.
Yeah. You could invest it if you're that type.
Which would be kind of saving, but it's a form of saving.
Right. You want to look to the future. You don't want to put your trust in your ability to make money and be like, well, I'm putting my trust that this is going to grow and I'm going to be rich off of this. However, if it's not doing anything, what did Jesus say even with the talent? The guy that hid his talent, he's like, at least you could have put it in the bank so you can get interest, man. What were you doing?
Yeah, you could have done something.
Okay, he didn't say it like that, but,
Well,
but
I think that was the tone, maybe, most likely.
So what's that?
That was the tone.
That was the tone? Like, what were you thinking? You could have at least done this, man. You could have...
Well, like you said, like taking a missions trip, if you have that opportunity and you have the funds available, then you're free to go whenever.
Yeah, you don't have to be a burden on anybody else. You don't have to sit there and go and raise money real quickly. You have the ability. Paul supplied his own needs most of the time. When he went out, he was a tent maker. He made his own. He didn't have to go raise funds. Now, people did support him. And once again, I'm not saying that getting support is a bad thing.
No,
but you got to go out there and do your work too sometimes. And if you're young, are you working overtime? Are you trying to work a lot? Is this for a very specific thing? Are you getting ready to get married? Are you planning to buy a house? Because houses aren't cheap. And so maybe you do have to save up. Are you neglecting family time? There's a lot of things to think about here that if it's okay to work a full-time job, but do you have the freedom to pull back if you needed to? If you wanted to do a missions trip, if you wanted to go on a missionary venture or whatever,
right?
Do you have the funds available? What if you needed to? It's a time to get married and you need to get a house. Is it better to start off with a paid off house or with there's in our circles, there's like a movement, like a man has to be completely prepared before he gets married. I think that's utter nonsense. And I hope there's not dads listening to this like, oh my goodness, how do you say this? You need to be prepared as a man of God, but to like get your house paid off and have a full-time job and all, that is American way. That is the American way. That's not necessarily biblical. You're not getting it from the Bible. You're just getting it from a culture and a good idea. It's not a bad idea, but it's not coming from the Bible. And you're putting a lot of extra burdens on a man that you probably didn't have on you when you got married. So we got to be very careful about that.
Exactly. Yeah. Those are expectations that are sometimes unrealistic.
Very unrealistic.
Expectations.
I was going to say, we know what expectations.
Yes, they ruin relationships. Hey, that is ingrained in us, okay? So,
it is.
It worked.
It's true, though. It really is true.
So I don't know. This is such a big topic, and I know a lot of people are afraid to email, and my kids are like, I'm not emailing. That's weird. And I'm like, but if you have a comment
why
about...
is it so weird?
Because they live here, so maybe it's okay for you, but they live here, so that's all.
Maybe I should email myself, and would that be weird?
That
might be weird.
Well, you're on the show, Larry, and you emailed, so that's kind of weird.
Well, you wouldn't be,
Larry?
Well, you wouldn't be.
What are you doing?
You wouldn't be emailing yourself. You'd be emailing the show.
That's a good point. That the show has a question, and no, but if you want to email the show, if you want to comment on this, or maybe give a story of how God has provided in a miraculous way for you, that's talk@fellowshipofbelievers.org. That is talk@fellowshipofbelievers.org. Please, someone email. I mean, I haven't heard from my consultant in a while. I'm going to be seeing him this weekend. And
Pam just asked me about him if I talked to him recently. I'm like, no, I need to call him.
Yeah, well, you're not going to be there this weekend, but we're having another little fellowship gathering.
Rub it in some more. Thank you.
I know. But these are fun and exciting times. I think Andre said he's expecting about 150 people there, so that's good.
Wow.
We enjoy getting together with these believers, and so this is a different group. I don't know all the people in this particular group that's up there, so this will be fun. I don't really like meeting new people. Maybe I do. I should I say that on the air? I don't know.
I think you do.
Sarah thinks I do, but I don't know. I do. I don't mind meeting new people, but I feel a lot more comfortable around people I know. I know that's not shocking. Most people probably are like that.
Yeah.
But new people stress me out. It's like, okay, am I going to like this person or am I not going to like this person? And but anyway, this is money. I don't know if we're going to next week talk about marriage and money or if we're going to talk some more about money, but it's going to be about money. I know this is like a part 2 and next week's going to be a part 3, but at some point we're going to talk about marriage and money, and I think that is extremely important.
Marriage.
Yes, marriage and money. And it causes a lot of problems. And how do we work out some of those issues? And once again, it's very simple. I think I don't want to give away the show, but selfishness is at the heart of a lot of these issues. And we don't want to be selfish. That is the problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, speaking of money, most of the stress we get from money is because of bad decisions we make.
Pretty much.
And a lot of it comes from selfishness. So right back to where we started.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It sounded like you were going to tell a story about one of the mistakes you made, but no.
I kind of did last week.
Yeah, that is true. No, but yeah, we do make a lot of mistakes, and that's the thing I want to do say here at the end is that, look, we're not trying to say we're better than other people here. And in fact, we've made our fair share of mistakes. We're all on this journey together where we're learning, and we're hoping that, especially young people that are listening, that they don't have to make as many mistakes. They can learn from other people's mistakes. They can see the benefit of trying to avoid debt. They can avoid certain aspects of our culture and, walk in godliness. That's kind of what we're hoping that people look at and or listen to or watch, depending on what you're doing, if you're on YouTube or on the podcast here. But we're trying to get you towards godliness, not selfishness, and get out of that mentality. So anyway, I think that's about it. How much time we got there, Joshua? Oh, okay, we've gone over, but that's fine. Jeremiah would be happy that we're not limited to an hour. We went over a little bit. And so that's for you, Jeremiah. I hope you enjoyed the extra bonus 15 minutes. So anyway. All right, guys. Well, I think that'll be it for the week. Thank you, Larry, for joining us. And Babe, as usual, thank you for your input. And we will be back next week.
You've been listening to the Mike Charleston Podcast.